Well, yeah, you can't climb it because it's spinning around. Okay, so I'm gonna hit go live. I think I'm done. Bud, why don't you go hang out with your mom? I'm on TV. One second, guys.
Take your time.
Ugh. All right, what did I miss? Just making the start of the recording kind of stale, aren't I? Okay, so here's the backlog, and I have a couple of things that basically I just went back to the start of 2020, whatever this part of 2022 is, just a little bit past
Mm-hmm.
the beginning of 2023, and uh, if you asked me to do something prior to that point and it's not on this list, then I have no idea what it is, and I will need you to ask me to do it again. Sorry. But
Okay.
uh, this is everything I could find that I thought was a good idea to do.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I'll be working on first, which is just breaking our giant forum.py file into multiple files to make it easier to develop. We might use Flask blueprints for that, but I think there's like a requirement to make like a subdirectory in the URLs there, so it's not my first choice on how to do it. And the other thing would be uh, this one, making Docker containers so people can just kind of hit Vagrant up or Docker run or whatever and get a baby
Okay. Yeah.
Citopia running, which should really help the people that aren't on Linux too. Uh, every other feature, like actually getting like private channels so you can look at your stuff in the same environment the server will run it. We'll get around to that. A lot of other features, like I believe that both of these are actually kind of like half done or half baked in the current code, but until it's done, I'm not checking it off. So, and while I'm working on these things, I'll give you guys a tour of how I make new features on the back end to just kind of help get uh, new people acquainted with how the back end works. So
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm going to do this kind of primitive style and just go to my repo, and I have these are untracked files. This doesn't look like there's any actual code that's changed. Like, do I have anything open? I do not. So let's look at the files in here. The main code for the backend is forum.py. That's the definition of all of the API endpoints. And model.py. And that is the SQL Alchemy definition of the database tables and all the relations that our data has. So between these two things, the model of the data and the access to the endpoints, that's that's basically it. That's everything that the backend does. Uh, are there even any other files in here? Oh, the admin console. That can be really handy if you are trying to test the database or test the front end on certain data, because you can uh, build the test DB, which includes a couple of users and roles in different groups. And the premise behind it is that it demos how the permission system works by making examples of all the different ways it can be used. And the .db file, presently, we're using a database of SQL Alchemy for development, but we're only using it through SQL Alchemy. And the reason for that is SQL Alchemy supports all databases, MySQL, Postgres, and SQLite. We're just using SQLite because it's very quick and easy for a local development thing. If we use a Docker container, I'm going to use SQL Alchemy there too, just to get the thing up and running. Production will be on Postgres. So, All right, let's get into form.py, and it is a mess. Like, what is the actual size of this file? It's not 1,000 lines. It's 960 lines right now, which is, a lot of that is actually comments. So I wouldn't take that to be too intimidated by it. But here is the grand tour. The beginning is all imports. We really only rely on like uh, JSON, random, func tools. Those are Python standard library. We use a lot of Flask, and I try to import every single thing we use from Flask right up top. And we use a couple of SQL Alchemy things. I think that's all the dependencies we have is just Flask and SQL Alchemy. So it's really not a complicated contraption of a web application. I I wanted to keep it simple because like I am forced to use like a lot of tooling, a lot of frameworks, a lot of things at work that make it very complicated because we have like big kind of like the bureaucracy of requirements on top of us. For this, I really wanted to keep the server as kind of simple and accessible as possible because a lot of the people that are working on it, this is their first introduction to backend. It's their first introduction to Python, even in some cases. So we need those libraries, but I'm trying not to add any more complication than is necessary. And well, what are these two methods? Create a blank database and uh, turn a password into a checkable hash. So um, basically, when you give your password, that's going to go over HTTPS to the server. It actually can, we can see your password, we could print it out. We don't do those things because it's bad security practice, but it's turned into a hash on the server. And uh, yeah, that's the only stuff that's defined that's not API behavior here. Um, So the first couple of routes are all related to user access. So register, this is what creates new user records. And like I think all the documentation I think is pretty good now because every single one of these methods has uh, definitions of all the parameters that it requires. Like when we see a block like this means that the register API endpoint requires these three fields to be in the object that it gets. So you send a JSON request to the API server, it's going to check for these. If they're not there, it's going to give an error message. Or they might be optional. You have to read all the field descriptions to know what the client has to send. And it will send back a response that looks like this. And from the front end, you're probably looking for success true so that you can proceed to the next thing. Or success false would be uh, your chance to make an error message and display something to the user to let them know their stuff did not work. So, and then there's always examples of how to operate this from curl. And the reason you'd want to do that is because if you're having trouble with the the front end not doing something, if it works from curl, that means the back end is doing the right thing and the front end is not sending the right thing or not receiving or not reacting to what it receives back correctly. If you send a test command to the API with curl and it doesn't work, then the front end can't possibly be the problem. So using curl is a great way to split the problem in half between front end and back end. And um, kind of similar for login. This is what creates your cookie. And working with cookies with curl is a little bit weird. You have to basically save them to a file. But it can be done. I know there's some talk about moving away from cookies and using something more like OAuth, more modernized. And I am 100% behind that. I want to do that. But I am not going to do that first. What we have already works for test purposes. And I'll show you in a second here how authorization is handled in the API and how we're going to make use of those. So
Yeah, on the account thing. Oh, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
go
Can
ahead,
I
go ahead.
interrupt? Because Candy was saying that he wanted to do something with the tokens.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's similar to what the OAuth is, or is that also completely different?
Yeah, so good point. JWT JavaScript Web Tokens, I think, is uh, the term he was using. That
Mm-hmm.
is uh, basically using like object storage from JavaScript code to remember your session, as opposed to cookies, which is very like 1990s web way of storing information in the browser. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, cookies are a bit dated, but frankly, there's nothing wrong with them unless you have a specific use case. The reason I bring up OAuth, which is a completely different thing, OAuth
Okay.
is a open authentication framework, which basically, if you've ever seen a button that says login with Google, login with Facebook, you're basically borrowing
Mm-hmm.
your account from somewhere else to create an account with a new website, and you don't have to manage the password at that new website. That's what OAuth is, and we can
Okay.
100%
Yeah. Yeah.
provide that functionality, which I think you need that sort of thing to be like a first class member of the web. So we definitely want to do OAuth, and that would require us to use web tokens. And what we can actually do in that same move is store, like you can create a local account with an email and password, but store your session with a web token. So it would be the same for both token or OAuth. And yeah, we obviously definitely want to do that. So I will do that eventually. It's just uh, first things first is getting the rest of the backlog in shape. And when we do
Mm-hmm.
that migration, we have a logout method. Yeah, we have a verify user session. It's not a route. It's a helper function. And I think what I need to get to is here's fetching sessions. Where's my decorators? Those might be the decorators actually. Let's look at them. Yeah. So these are the decorators. Login required post and login required get. I have kind of it's not in the backlog, but I have kind of a goal to eventually get back to these and address them a little bit. Here's how they work: is whenever you see a API endpoint throughout this whole thing that says login required get, or a different one that would say login required post. Okay, there's another get. There's another get. There's another get. There's a post. So this decorator basically in a single line of code here. So this is an API endpoint for creating a new post. You have to say what category you're posting it in, but you can create a new post. All the post data is going to be included in your request. I don't want to have to copy a million times through my code. How do we make sure that a person is logged in, and can they do that? So uh, from the decorator will simply uh, make sure that they're logged in and return an error message before it ever calls the endpoints code. So to do that, login required post will check the user's cookie, and then if they're not logged in, return an error message. If they are logged in, it fetches the objects about the user out of the database, and it provides them to the API endpoint as new arguments. So if you are logged in, you will get a database session for the API endpoint to look up new data or add new data, and you will get the user object so you can check their permissions. So the permission checking happens inside the API endpoint, but making sure they're logged in and figuring out who they are is done uh, immediately. So, for example, since this one is a post, here's the actual code behind it, and here's like the anatomy of every API endpoint. Is the first part is validating all of the data that the user submitted. So what I'm doing is defining Python variables, and I'm getting the data out of their request. And if we get exceptions, we can return a success false type response immediately. Uh, this one right here, this is what a database query looks like in SQL Alchemy. Is we're gonna uh, I should probably do a whole video just on piecing together queries from the database. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to start with the category that the user requested to post to. We're going to get that category. We're going to join that with the permissions to that category, and then join those permissions with the groups that this particular user is in. And if we get nothing back from the database, that means there is no permission in the database that links the user that's logged in with the category they're posting to. And if they don't have permissions, we return a success false object. If that category exists, that means we A, found that the category they requested is a real one, and B, uh, verified that they have permission to post there. Then we can create a new database record, punch it into the database, and commit. That's all we have to do. Finally, we can return a success true, and that's what people are, what the client should be looking for. They're like, oh, success true. That means that the thing I just submitted, or it's JavaScript, so it's probably a callback. And the callback can say whatever that was is true. This is your queue on the front end client to pop up a little green arrow or redirect their page now that the request went through, that sort of thing. So, and that is the structure of every single API endpoint. Is step one, we define where it's going to be on the web. This is the path to make that API endpoint. Step two, if it's not a publicly facing thing, like register is publicly facing. You can register an account even if you're not logged in. Log out is, I think you have to be logged in for that. But a lot of the GET API endpoints are still allowed to be public because we have to account for anonymous access. But if it requires you to be logged in, you use one of these decorators to say you must be logged in to add data or you must be logged in to fetch data. And what I was trying to get around to saying is I have these two decorators. I mean to go back and make it a single decorator that handles all the permissions in just one decorator. But for now, it was easier to make them separate so they can behave just a little bit differently. Then for the actual endpoint, we validate our data, we check our permissions, and then we make the database change. And that's how every single API endpoint for Citopia works. And I don't think that we can do much to make the behavior simpler, but whenever we go to revamp the access system, that's all just going to go in these decorators. The API endpoints themselves should change 0% when we switch out the authentication system. Because as long as we return a user object out of the database, then all the other API endpoints will basically be unaware that the authentication system swapped out. So I'm not worried about that being difficult to do. We can add whatever fields we want to a user object, and it'll work just fine. And we can change out how authentication works in the decorator. The API endpoints don't need to be rewritten. So lowest concern for a conflict there. So being worried like we should get to it early on, I don't think that's a concern I have with it. But to split this apart, what I'm actually going to be doing now that I've talked for 20 straight minutes is basically try to categorize these and move them to separate files so that there's a little less scrolling to go on here. And what I should also do is I'm going to pull up, hold on, let me, I'll turn off screen capture on the stream for a second while I go rooting around for my notes. So probably something else I should do is quit my email client, shouldn't I? That's basic streamer. Since, okay. So I have Project Citopia and only like a year of notes. Look, I didn't even take any notes then. This would be... It's going to be fun when this goes back like 3 whole years. I think it's like definitely over a year and a half at this point, but it's just going to keep ticking by, right? So what I want from this is just to get all of the API endpoints there are, and that should help. And can I put this thing always on top? Yeah. So what I'm going to try to do now is make a list of all the API endpoints and get some idea of where they go. I don't know if this list exists anywhere, but it really should. And
Sorry, what kind of list?
This list of all the API endpoints we have. And
Oh, okay.
really they should, like, I wrote all these docs inside the definitions there. I meant to go back and make something that extracts the documentation for the API endpoint by parsing the code file, which is how a lot of documentation systems do it. So that would be login required.
Maybe some fancy editors do it for you.
Yeah, I'm like a caveman with my editor. This text editor was literally available in the late 1970s, so. But hey, I want Citopia to feel like a bespoke product from the very beginning, right? I should probably add, like, what is this? It's post. It's actually
maybe
get post.
Also handy to add the parameters that you need.
Yeah, I mean, that's all in the documentation. I just need a checklist, and I kind of know what they do. I need to figure out how to categorize them, though. What files are they going to be split into?
Okay. Yeah, I think it's easy to put in like a forum file, an account file, and then in the future we have multiple different things like clubs. So all of these things go in separate files. I think that makes sense.
So I can tell you right now that, like, let's see. All of these look like user management API endpoints, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
Categories.
And this could be for forum.
And then here's the post version of that. And then thread. And then the post version of that.
You have a typo with the second category, by the way. And 137. Yeah.
And then the API post, which is not HTTP post, it's like a forum post. Unfortunate. And this says /edit. It's a post method, but there's, I don't know. Mouse, have we even used this yet? Have we actually made posts editable in the forum?
Not on the front end, at least. Yeah. I don't think I ever tried it out.
And we can also delete them.
But we do need an edit, right? Or what do you mean?
It's...
Oh, okay, yeah.
So this is like a little bit of the way that you use the API requires you to understand a little bit how the database schema works, which is Oh, maybe not good, but also a little bit unavoidable with a project like this. So there are categories and threads. A category is a list of posts that have some thematic connection to each other. And when you
Mm-hmm.
post a new OP, a new original post, it goes into the category. So you pick the category it goes into and you post it. But if you're replying to a thread, you find that thread and then you post to the thread.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to edit an OP or edit a reply post, those are both post objects in the database, and you have to call post edit or post delete to delete your thread or delete your reply in a thread. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's not the end of the world. It's just, what do we have here? API social. I
But wait, I'm confused. What is the problem with the setup that we have now?
you I like it, but it's just kind of weird that like there's no API endpoint to create a post. You have to basically add it to a category or add it to a thread. But once the post exists, it has its own object ID that you can go edit or delete the post directly, and that's irrelevant if it's a reply or an original post. So it's it requires you to kind of understand that thing that I just said, which is that OPs and replies are the same kind of object, and threads
Mm-hmm.
are a separate thing. Like you can't have a thread with zero posts in it; it has to have an OP. But
I have a question that I'm not sure if
yeah,
I yeah. Um this is more with moderating. Uh is there, like, I'm thinking when a user sort of delete a post,
yep,
if there is a possibility to make it log somewhere so that any moderator can go back and check it, because being able to completely delete something can cause like a bit of problem when you're getting rid of evidence.
yeah. So I wanted to show you. What I'll show you right here is the edit log table. If anyone edits a post, edits their
Mm,
reply, deletes their post, any kind of thing like that, that will
mm,
create a entry in the edit log. And
mm,
what's even more to the point is like the edit log references the object that was deleted, and it also references who did it. So if an admin or a moderator takes an edit action, the change they made and the object they changed are recorded with a timestamp in the edit log. So that does it prevents abuse by moderators. It prevents abuse by forum users. And once we move closer to production, especially with like EU laws like GDPR and the right to be forgotten, we do have to manage these edit logs professionally. But
mm,
you know that's a given. I think with this group that we'll be
Mm-hmm.
professional about it.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
uh, what content should stay in the edit log permanently? I'm open to any suggestions or ideas people have. But basically, I can record changes to the database at maximum level right now, and we can crank it down to obey the law and respect people's privacy from there.
Yeah, because I feel like having some sort of like when you delete a post, that it sort of gets logged for a certain amount of time and then it gets deleted, but just so uh,
Right.
moderators have the ability to uh, like go back and check what's been deleted, because otherwise you have the opportunity for people to say horrible stuff and then just delete it. Oh, I didn't do anything.
Right.
uh, I'm just thinking like,
Right, and especially if people have like notifications and they receive that message immediately, we could be like transmitting hurtful things to people, but then letting the abuser delete any record of it. And I don't want that to
yeah,
happen. So,
no, exactly, no. So that's just what I was thinking. Continue.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think European laws, I'm not sure on this, but the GDPR does say that you can keep user information for maximum 6 months after they request you to explicitly delete it.
okay.
So that is only in case they say, I want my account deleted and I want all my information
Yeah,
deleted.
because
Then you have 6 months to delete it. But if they do not request it, the situation is different, I think. You have more time, I
Right.
believe.
But something that a user posts in a forum, is that counted as user information?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. So
Okay,
everything a
okay,
user says, does, all their
okay,
private
okay.
tracking
Just
stuff.
checking.
Yeah.
And I will say that, like, due to the heavily European participation in this project, Citopia is and always has been hosted entirely in the EU. I think our data center is in Germany because, frankly, I don't really trust the United States with people's information in terms of privacy law. So I'm, you know, keeping it stays in the EU whenever you make
Okay,
posts. I don't know what API test is supposed to be. Oh, this is the Microtopia. So Microtopia, in case you haven't picked it up from context, is these extremely minimal. Uh, I think API test might actually be the old API. So the old API test page was a single HTML page that had every API endpoint as a separate kind of paragraph that you could use some text boxes and buttons to interact with the API. That's how I was testing that it works. But Microtopia is uh, my upgrade from that, and uh, I don't expect the front end developers to basically have to humor me whenever I start developing something, and I do need to. Uh, I always start with curl because I'm just a Linux guy, and that's how I envision APIs working is over curl. But then I need to kind of demonstrate the buttons and the text boxes and the client side validation I would expect that API endpoint to have. So that's why I'm writing Microtopia a little bit at a time. And Microtopia really should implement all of these. Uh, that's another reason I wanted this checklist. But, uh, and let me just show you the code for that. I think I can go to Microtopia. Wait. Is it under static? Yeah. So let's just look at the. Can't see half the thing. And like this is Microtopia. It's not great, but this is just pure HTML, and all it provides is uh, a couple of functions to modify the DOM and a couple of functions to call the API. So what do these do? Yeah, they all just kind of like snatch some values out of the document, and then this is like a little in the way still, isn't it? This is the code that I should probably bundle up for you guys to use in the front end. So when I call register there, it is talking about, oh, I think that might be in microtopia.js. So this is still does not implement the whole API, but this is a zero dependency, just using XHML HTTP request to make an asynchronous call to any API endpoint and pass in whatever data you give it. So this is kind of a translation from the Python function calls on the back end and the required arguments. I'm just making a JavaScript function that can do that. And what it can do as a result is any callback that you want, you can just pass the callback to this function, and your callback function will be called whenever the API is done, success or fail. And if I wanted to make a slightly fancier one of these that's more tailored to Citopia, maybe we can make it so that you can pass in a callback for success and a callback for failure, because now every API endpoint in Citopia returns objects, and it has success, true or false, as the answer to it. I believe that's true. But this is the whole guts of Microtopia. Uh, and what I basically do for new pages on that is I copy paste that 130 lines of HTML and then move the uh, the name of the fields around a little bit to make it have different text box names or contents or whatever. It's not pretty, but uh, it was never going to be pretty if I make it because I just have zero style. But by building that, I can kind of help you guys look at what your front end code is supposed to do. I know the front end we have is Vue, which is going to be a lot more integrated between the style and the code. But I'm going to continue making those tiny pages because they take almost no time to do, and they are more accessible for you guys than running curl, especially if you're in a Docker container. The Docker container will host Microtopia automatically. Probably something I should add is for production we need to not host that anymore, but it wouldn't hurt. It's just ugly. So all right, and let me also pull up the backlog again and kind of compare the API endpoints here. User management, forum, interaction, and what would we call social? Let's go 3. I don't know. Because what else would...
What is the social?
Social is how you get your friends list, how you... it doesn't have all the endpoints defined yet. I don't think I've even sketched out how it's supposed to work. But this would be like friends, blocking, maybe private messages or blog. I don't... there's some features there that are kind of...
I think that's social management, right?
Social interaction or similar. Yeah, but I think
we sound like nerds that need to touch grass. I think that's called social interaction.
I haven't heard
What
of
is
it.
that?
I think those words.
How are people interacting socially if the Citopia API is not finished yet?
Yeah.
Also, maybe rename user management to account management, and then user management will be things like profiles.
Okay.
Or yeah.
Well, I think your profile is supposed to be in user.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like something, a difference between user and account, I guess.
Yeah. So, and this would also be like... and this would be profile management. Here's a question for you guys. Where do blogs belong?
Okay.
That's not really... That's more individual to the user.
Because I can tell you how it works on the back end. I saw that blogs are on the roadmap, so I kind of planned for it when I made the schema for Citopia. And what I envision doing is there will be a new category that doesn't show up on the front page, invented in the back end for, you'll have this is a category, and only the single user has access to it. And the same way that admins can add people permission to view a category, users can give people permission to view their blog category. So at that point, they can either make separate threads, as basically blog posts would have replies on them the same as forum threads do, or you can just reply to your own blog in that way, and it will use all the same stuff that the forum does. So if we have like a BB code or Markdown or whatever, that would work instantly in the blog because it's just going to be another type of post object.
Okay, yeah. I think that is smart.
But it does mean that when we go to implement blogs, we will probably be copy pasting a lot of the same code from the forum to make it work, even if it's going to end up slightly different because of those. Basically, the secret categories is how the permissions will be managed, but still.
Okay, yeah. But is it necessary to make a separate category for every user? Or just relate it? I don't know how it works with the database, but is it not possible to just relate the thread, or in this case the block,
the reason I would do it that
account?
way is because the permissions right now, when you get permissions to something, the way that works is, how can I even show this? Go back to the model. So you are a user, and a user, it says groups, but that's actually defined a different way with how the database connects these things together. So you are a user, you have an ID, which is just a number, and groups have a number. So I think the actual association table between them is group membership. So if you actually go, bless you, whoever that was far away. If you go,
that was my mother.
Mama Mouse. If you go look into SQLite, you'll see a table called user group link, and that has a user ID, like a number 1 or 10 or whatever, and a group ID, another number 1 or 10. So, and also, yeah, the kind of, if you're an admin of the group, that's marked on that table too. So let's say you're a user like Joe, and you want to make your blog posts only available to your friends, then the user would be a member of a group, and the group in this case I would say is your friends can be stored as a group. And when we go to category and permission set, there are these permissions. You can be able to view something, be able to post a new thread, be able to post replies in that category, or maintain, which is the permission for edit other users' posts and otherwise behave as a moderator. So if you have these 4 different permissions that are associated with a category. So I can't give you individual permissions on a thread right now. I know that we've talked about like we need to be able to do that, or at least like override specific threads, or lock a thread, or bizarrely basically give people permissions they don't have in a whole category to give them that permission on an individual post. That's actually kind of complicated because it basically means that every thread object needs a separate permission object. I have not figured out how I'm going to solve that particular challenge at this point. If your blog has its own category, and if your friends are another kind of group, then we can use the same permission system that protects different clubs or different categories the exact same way for people to manage their own blog or personal posts. So that's
okay.
I'm shrugging a bit. It's not ideal, but I have this pretty robust permission system already. As long as we don't ask it to do too much weird stuff, I should be able to cover most of the use cases. Like locking a thread is something that we don't have in the database yet. but I would say like adding locking would be easier than adding. You don't normally have permission to post in a category, but for a specific post, you can give that permission. That's more complicated than just locking a post and not letting anybody but admins post to it. But
Okay.
yeah, sorry I kind of went off on a tangent, I think. But the way to split this up then would be.
No, that's fine. Also, for now, I think the feature is good. I was just thinking of maybe in the future, you also with blog posts, you want some blog posts to be just for friends
Yeah.
and some for everyone. So, but that's only for the future, so nothing that you need to worry about now.
Yeah, it really does mirror the same permissions that we want to extend threads to have then. So it's
Yeah, I was maybe thinking, maybe this is stupid, but is it possible to just remove the permission stuff from the categories and just do it on the threads? And then for thread, you first check what thread it's posted to, and then you have default permissions, but users can choose, or like only elevated users like moderators or admins can choose to change the default permissions. Is that maybe something that would be
yeah, the
feasible?
default permissions we're still going to need them on categories, uh,
Okay.
because one of the premises I started with is that categories can be hidden from the front page and they can be hidden from certain users. If you're not in a given club, or like let's say you're not in like the Citopia architect groups, you don't even see those categories. You can't even look at the posts that are in there. You're not even aware of its existence. And if even if you like heard from somebody else that it exists, if you try to go to a category by ID number, what you'll get back is an error message that looks identical to that doesn't exist. So it won't acknowledge the existence of things you can't uh, see with your permission set. So we still need them on categories. Maybe consulting the category permission as the default and then having a separate permission object for each individual thread is the way to do that. That's it's very likely that that's how that'll get built.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
And what I probably should do once we get these things split into different modules is uh, make the debug stuff not even load when we're in production mode. I'll probably do that with an environment variable. But presently I don't want to break anything. Let's just split this thing apart and see if I can get it to still work. So I'm going to start by Googling what do you even call that? Flask blueprints? Wrong screen. I'll pull it up. And by the way, we are done with the always on top business. Oh, they changed the logo. It was like one of those O'Reilly book drawings, but now it's very minimalist.
Oh, I thought it was a pepper.
A pepper. No, it's a drinking horn. Aren't you Nordic?
No, well, officially, what is Netherlands part? It's not part of the Nordic bloc officially, so.
Okay, so factor an application to a set of blueprints. Like I think this is. I've only seen blueprints where you can basically make like a like 10 or 20 endpoints and then they have to go into like a subdirectory. I don't want to make the API any deeper than it already is, which presently we have /API on everything because I don't want it to conflict with the front end stuff when it's hosted together. And then like I don't want to make a category thread and posts separate blueprint. unless I can put them in a file together, because we really don't need every single function of the API to be a separate file. That's too far. So this would be from app import yada yada app register blueprint. So what that kind of makes me think is that we'll have basically forum.py is going to be the initial imports, and then 4 or 5 of this line, and then the, like right at the bottom of, where's the code? The bottom of the code, this is the only thing it does if you run it as a program. This is what I've been running to debug it, is if you're running forum.py as a program, just turn on the database, you know, make a new one if you need to, and then run. Okay, so maybe you can do that. And we're actually not doing any templates under Flask. Flask has, honestly, maybe that's how I should have made Microtopia. If I was making Microtopia just for myself, I would have done it with Flask templates, but it's not portable if you're trying to make a separate standalone web page out of it, so I didn't want to get that tangled up. But Flask has pretty cool Python embedding that you can run the code server side and return a fully rendered page to people with all kinds of dynamic content, which honestly it runs better on the client because they just get something that's already fully baked, but it's maybe a little more latency, and everyone in the front end would have to code in Python, so not everyone's favorite thing to do. Okay, so I think what I'll do to try is my first blueprints. I don't need that. Let's just, yeah, that works fine. The margins help me out here. Okay, so let's go to the tippy top. And after we make the app, I'm going to say that'll be, what's the first one I'll make? I'll do this social one. And we might even be able to do something a little fancier, let's say. Okay, and now let me make a module. And what is the actual file name for that? I think it's like, is it index dot? I think it's main. Just double check, because, come on. Because what you usually see in these things is just one line in main.py, and then we can make a separate blueprint file, and this is where I would put this thing. Let's see. And probably have to copy all of my Flask imports into these blueprints, but I'm making a blueprint for a blueprint before I try to cook anything. Okay, so and that would be, here's my notes. No thumbnail, that's why. Let's call it API social. And that would be so I probably also have to do let's see. I don't actually know how to import up. What would that be? Get our decorators. Which those will have to be modulized somehow too. And let's just return I should at least do okay, now let's see how many ways this fails. So get out of this, get out of this folder. So if I say Python and I import social, I have this module which should be, it matches up with the social subfolder, and I should be able to say social.social blueprint. No? Okay, let's if I look in social, we have this file, social blueprint.py, and main should just import everything that's in the folder, but I'm kind of making that up from memory. Okay, so calling it that way, importing it as a submodule does work because it looks in the folder, the subdirectory for that Python file now. But I need to define decorators, and now I'm not sure how to structure that, because we probably need a directory Honestly, I kind of wouldn't like to use a directory. I would like to do top level. Stubs that shouldn't break anything. And can I do that now? Let me try to import that. Yeah, that works now. So because let me see if it even works. Like if I go into this directory and run the interpreter and try to, yeah, inside the modules directory, this would say the decorators module isn't found because it's up a folder level. So I guess that's just how it works when you make submodules for your Python project. You can't run them in their directory. They require the stuff to do that. So now if I run the forum, it says on line 46, app.register blueprint. What is this? Oh, maybe because I need to do... No, it seems fine to me. By the way, I don't know if I'm like holding you guys hostage, but you can totally ask questions or leave if that's kind of all the intro is going to be today.
It's okay.
I don't have questions because I don't understand this part.
They
I
want
don't
to
have
see
any
how the sausage is
experience.
made.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I think it's very interesting to see your, how do you say, the thought process.
Yeah. I wish I could say it was a thought process. It's kind of a smattering of Googling and just trying crap.
Well, that's
Programming
well
in a
said.
nutshell.
Let's see. Let's make sure I didn't... it looks kind of identical. Oh, wait, I have a file open here, so... Flask blueprints. Maybe I reverse it. Let's see if that breaks anything. Decorators can be a little tricksy in Python. Okay, maybe that's why. Other one. This is about to be ugly. Okay, so now if I go to /API/social, should say missing 2 keyword required arguments. Yeah. So the decorator actually ran, and let me actually go to putting it in the normal order isn't going to change anything, right? Yeah, they're both well-behaved decorators. Okay, so okay, so that means my blueprint idea will work with the pattern that I have. I just want to kind of sanity check the way this reads when you come across it. So this is what I came up with, which is a little bit horrifying. So what I think I'm going to change this to look like, and I don't know if you guys do this, but this is something I've started doing now, is I'm going to write the code how I want it to look when I'm using it as an end user, and then I'm going to go modify it to work that way in the actual implementation. So I would like to say from Citopia imports social. Blueprint
I am
social.
confused. Why can you not just do the import without the blueprint thing? Because isn't it usually with Python files you can just import functions from other...
Yes. In this case, I need to import the social blueprints or whatever kind of blueprint objects from Flask. This one, you can kind of see my first crack at it. I'm not just sort of getting warmed up on what I want the module structure to look like. I would like to look more like this. Social, what are the other ones we listed off? Forum, accounts, profile, social, debug. Oh wait, I'm doing them in the wrong order. Accounts, form profile, social, debug, and this should be like if replace with okay, so to make it look like that, these will have to be Okay, let's see if I can do that. And I'm going to change my mind again. Let's see, Citopia. Yeah, and then later on we can just add games as a separate blueprint, and it'll keep the main forum file nice and tidy. So, what I expect to see, let me look at that again. Citopia modules, import social. Unknown location. Whoops. Oh, that's why. Let me try this. Social equals still a little bit of a mess making going on, but it should be tidy in the end. Is main even running? Maybe I need to call it, maybe it's like index or something. Oh, it's init.py. Maybe that would do it. Okay, that looks correct now. So it was really just that I had the wrong file name. Back to the forum. This should say let me just comment these out for now. Accounts is not the one I want to start with. Start with social. I already defined that file. Oh, account cannot be imported, so I need to define all these guys in the init file. Okay, and API endpoint still available. We are ready to copy paste a chunk load of uh, stuff into their own separate files now. So
I have to go now, but thank you very much for the overview and tour.
thanks for popping in. Really
Bye bye,
Yeah.
Max.
happy to have you guys along. So I'm gonna wrap this up and
Oh, okay.
call this feature done with splitting the modules. I'll commit it and then I'll stop the
Uh,
stream.
Before you leave,
Yeah?
I have an unrelated question.
Yeah, go for it.
Because I'm with the artist team, and um, we kind of want to start like uh, gathering the items and such. And so we were sort of, or I was thinking about like how we should be naming the files. And I know probably you'll make something that like when you upload the files, they get some sort of ID or something. But is there anything we should keep in mind, like with how we sort of name the files for now?
So
Uh,
file names I'm not all that worried about
mm,
as long as you're able to match up a file name with what you want it to be called. Like if you had uh, like let me just give you an example in the like uh, files naming convention.
yeah, because I'm trying to set something like that up, but I don't know how specific I should be.
One thing that I don't think we've defined yet is what is the list of all the slots that you can fit something in. Like I know you can only wear like one blouse at a time or one top, and you can probably only wear one pants, but you might be able to wear like
No,
a skirt
I
and a
believe
pants.
we want it to be that you can wear like multiple pants at a time, so you
Okay,
can like merge sort of two items to create a
layer them.
sort of layered effect. Yeah,
Okay,
like
so
to.
if that is the case, then I think that there's kind of like no real limits to what the like you don't from a database perspective, I wouldn't be super worried about what slot it fits into if players can just stack them all up. So it's kind of a free for all. But if you want to call something like a, you know, red mushroom hat, maybe you want to call that something like red underscore mushroom underscore hat dot png or whatever. Uh, I would be able to convert that automatically. Otherwise, you could, if you wanted to call it like, you want an item called like red mushroom hat, and you want to call it like, hat004.png, then I would just need this kind of association in a text file that I can
Yeah, because
load.
what I've sort of come up with so far
Yeah.
is uh, name of the artist, because obviously like in the shop and stuff, we want to give all the artists like the recognition that they have made this, it's their design. So it starts off by artist name, then whether or not it collects like it's part of a collection, because obviously like during
Yep.
Halloween we'll have like Halloween collections, and so each collection will sort of this is just what I've thought of, so it's nothing decided yet. Like a collection could have like a sort of collection ID, so it would be a number. Like if it's the first collection, it will have a one. So basically, we'll be able to sort it. Like you could sort what, like if you only want to see items from one particular collection. If it doesn't belong to a collection, that number could be like a zero, followed by like a uh, outfit set number. So if it belongs to a specific set, because sometimes you make a whole outfit with different items, and obviously you want to be able to see what items kind of are meant to go with what other items. Yeah, so like artist name, collection, no, ID, you can say set ID, and the set ID would be a bit more like for each artist to sort of uh, yeah, exactly like that. And then like the category it's categorized in, so maybe it's like facial hair or hats or whatever it can be, and then a number, because obviously you can make the same artist can make in the same collection, in the same set, make, like, for example, more than one hair. So
Yep.
you'd have to have another number to say, like, this is the first hair in this set in this collection by this artist, right? And then after that, like, the color of the item. Is that a bit long? So it would be like spig 00 hair, uh, and then it could be, well, I was thinking like a number after hair, because you could make multiple hairs.
Okay.
Maybe I make like, so let's say I make a set for a Halloween collection, and I make a more feminine hair and a more masculine hair. Uh, but it's part of the same set and collection, so you'd still like want a ID for that specific hair. Uh, yeah, so like it's the second hair, and it's the color red, because obviously like any hair could have like any other like color option that
Yeah.
the art designs to. Does that make sense?
It does. That's good. I would definitely be able to load those directly into the database the way you're describing it. But
Yeah.
what I would recommend if you're not too far along is don't use
Yeah, no,
numbers.
I've been working on this like today. It's just no one has started uploading anything yet. It's me just.
Yeah, I would recommend if you are doing this, don't use numbers, which can be hard to trace back and people might get them mixed up. But actually name it like
Okay.
Halloween dash collection. And for set
Okay,
could be
but then it
like
will probably like Halloween 2023 or some stuff.
spooky
uh,
mushroom outfit or something.
okay.
So this is not too long, and if that really is like, because all this data doesn't actually need to be in the file name. When what I would like to do for the final version of this is that you can
Mm,
upload. You just go to a website, you drag and drop a single file or a zip
yeah.
file, and the website will unpack it and show you all the items and let you add them to a collection, name the set,
Yeah,
list them as
that's what I
variations to each
assumed
other. Yeah.
you were gonna do, or as a team, you. um, but it's just like, because now we're only sort of uploading our pictures, like whole pictures, but I wanted to sort of start gathering people's items. So I was just thinking, like, if we should adopt some sort of naming
Yeah.
convention from the beginning to just keep what we gather now sort of sorted.
Yeah, I agree. And I think probably the most helpful thing that you could do is when you get like we have this like sizzle reel of a bunch of images of like fully dressed people.
Mm,
Those are really helpful for like the title of a collection, kind of like the thumbnail for a collection. But all the individual image files of just PNGs for that one
mm,
item and a bunch of other transparency, where
mm.
it's aligned where it should go on top of the character. That's the most
Oh yeah,
important
we're
file
doing
for
that.
me.
So like every item is the 210 by 300 and whatever, I can't
Yeah,
remember in my head. Yeah.
yeah, that's perfect. And that, honestly, I think besides these two cleanup items, which I might be able to have done before my kid's up from nap, fingers crossed. Besides those two items, inventory is like the next big thing I want to work on.
Okay.
So because we need to see those avatars if people are going to be motivated to keep developing on it. So that's the very next thing I want to work on once I clean this up this afternoon.
Mm. So it's good, and I start collecting people's stuff so we can put them.
Yes, and if you could put them in
Should-
Google Drive and shoot me a link to everything, I would love to get as many live application demos of people's actual art that I can get together at one time. So if there's a Google Drive,
yeah,
just
I
sneak it to
we
me.
have a artist Google Drive, um, and I started working on it yesterday when I made these like different folders, like one folder's for head or whatever, and in the head it's the face and it's the hair and it's
Wow.
similar.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Okay, well then we're
awesome.
on the same page. I just
Yeah, really nicely done, Spade. Thank
I
you.
oh,
agree.
thank you.
Also on the items itself, I think we would benefit from having a meeting together with the artists to really, as you said, decide on all the categories of the
Yeah. So I
Yep.
was
clothing. Yeah.
oh, well, this is not related to the coding right now, so we can discuss this soon.
No, I mean, I can't wait to have that conversation. That's really kind of the actual stuff we've been trying to build for people to use this website, right?
Okay.
So,
Yeah. And as you described here already, these can be, yeah, we probably would need to make a model for it still, like a datagram
yeah,
model. But yeah, as you said here, the artist, the collection, these are all different columns that we can already think of. And
Hmm.
also, I know in the beginning we, well, not decided, but we settled on just uploading every item at the same size and just positioning them on the right part of the
yeah,
model, so you didn't have to bother with like the positioning, right, like the x or the y coordinates.
correct.
But the
Yeah.
more I think about it, it might actually be handier to do it with the coordinates. And the reason I'm saying that is because when you have to display the little item, for example, you display um, a piece of hair and it's in this small square preview, then you would have to position the item in that square anyways. So,
But
does that make sense?
but what I assume that could work like is because we have the model base
Mm-hmm.
and we have this sort of like if we would have like a model base that looks like a mannequin, that picture would also be the same size. And so let's say it's displaying a hair. So you would put that hair on top of the mannequin, uh, and you'd crop the like containing div to be sort of smaller so it wouldn't like display all of it, if that makes sense. I don't know. But
Yeah,
it would
because
be the
if
same
we,
like every hair or like every shirt, like they would have the sort of uh, I don't know if what I said makes sense. I'm bad at explaining.
Uh, it's just I think that it might be easier for if you're like browsing in the shops, for example, and every item is this little square preview, you know, like on Average Skies, for example, then the square preview would have to show like the item itself.
Cherry Coke and
But if
or
the
regular
item is
Coke,
like a
whichever one
small
is out there in the
bracelet
freezer for me. Thanks,
in this
honey.
larger canvas of like
Yes,
220
but that's
by.
what I'm saying. Like uh, the outer sort of like I really don't know how to explain it, but it wouldn't like size down the image to fit within these boxes. It would more like crop the 200 by 10 sort of canvas to only display where the like item is, if
Yeah,
that.
but to know how to crop it, you would need to know the coordinates of where that item
Well,
is,
if we
anyways.
assume that if it's in a specific category like hair, it
Mm-hmm.
would like all the hairs would be sort of cropped and displayed the same way because they would be on the same part of the body, or it could be different sort of because it would be the same cropping for whatever sort of part of the mannequin you choose. So if it's hair, it would only show like the head, but if it's long hair, it could display a bit more, but the same, but it would be the same amount of cropping as long as it's in like the same
Mm-hmm.
category.
I guess that would work for hairs, but maybe for dresses of different sizes or for background decoration, which could be anywhere on the canvas, it would be less handy, right?
So I guess the big distinction is: do you want to be able to just have every image be the same size, and when you load it, it's automatically in the right place with no freedom to move it, or do you want the freedom to nudge and tilt a specific image of one part in position on top of the mannequin. If you will never want to reposition it or like nudge it to the side or up or down, then there's no reason for them to be separately uh, positioned files. But if you do want that feature, then you do have to provide the coordinates for where it's going to go, and that can be adjustable once it's in the web editor. But I can't modify it once it's if they're the exact same size image just stacked up.
Well,
I
that's
think for
something
the
I
sorry?
guess we'll have to talk about then.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We'll have
definitely.
to plan a artist thing soon to.
I think maybe for future like redundancy, it is maybe better to have the coordinates. Um, and maybe also because I'm influenced by other sites, and on other sites they usually always tell you to specify the x and y
Yeah.
coordinates. So
Well, I've
then I'm
only
like,
played Ghost Supermodel, so I don't.
okay.
But also,
How
Mouse,
does Ghost Supermodel do that?
what I recommend is if a piece of a clothing or an object, an item, is the same size as the mannequin image file, then I can just automatically put that the offset is going to be 0, 0 because I know that it's that size. But if it's not that
Mm-hmm.
size, then we can ask them, and that means we can get started right now with the basic case, but later we can add that functionality. I can plan ahead to uh,
Yeah,
provide
that
that
would also
later.
be.
That's the way I would like to do it because I would like to be able to tilt my hats. I would like to be able to scoot things behind me
You're,
and
Well,
stuff, you know?
just saying tilting
Yeah, like
is
rotate around an angle. Yeah.
yeah, I know what you mean. But anything that isn't like 90 degrees are gonna mess up the pixels
Yeah.
because we're working on a really small scale.
True.
And uh, where pixels are placed are very sort of sensitive because one pixel change can change what an outfit looks like completely because you have so few pixels to work with. So tilting, even if you do like a nearest neighbor sort of tilting, it will look really, really messy. And even if it's like a blurred, sort of like the bicubic uh, rotating and stuff, that will look just really blurry instead. So I don't think tilting is really
Does that also happen when
possible.
you already save the image as like a rasterized file?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, if you tilt something by like 3 or 5 degrees, it can't really move pixels like half a pixel up or something. So it has to basically do the interpolation the same as when you're like blurring or zooming a you know
But
already rasterized file
in general, just nudging up and down is a pretty good idea. I think we
by
have
whole pixels. Yeah.
mentioned it a little because obviously I'm very new to the team, so I don't know much. But I think that's a good idea because sometimes, like when you make a hat and you make it with a certain hair in mind, that hat might be way too far up on the head compared to when you put it on top of another hair. So I definitely think nudging is something we should be able to do. I'm just saying rotating specifically will not look good. The only solution I can think of if all our images are made pixely small, that we scale them up, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's large pixel images, you know what I mean. But even that, because if you then tilt it, you will have tilted squares, tilted pixels, and that might ruin the sort of pixel look that we might be going for.
Okay. I had two. Sorry for the questions. I had two other questions. First of all the images that we upload, how is that going to be stored? How does that work?
So
I don't know
when you
if I.
upload a file, the server will accept it from the web client, and it will then be turned into
Oh, the blob
a
that you were
blob in the
talking about.
database. Yeah.
Okay.
So there won't be a million files on the server, but there will be a million rows in the database that have all the image contents there.
And in the future, do we like move to something like a content delivery network, or is that not any necessary?
So we could do a CDN. The way we would implement that is that the database would actually be distributed. You make a request, and that same uh, database response that it's there's not really a difference between like a file and a row in a database because we still have to handle the web request to get it right. And if it's in that
Mm-hmm.
certain folder, those that content can be delivered. What do you want to call it? Like globally or from a dynamic source, synced if it's a database row or a file, all the same. So CDN will work fine
Okay.
with blobs.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, because I thought the amount of files of items will increase really rapidly,
Yes.
very fast. So that is a consideration. And I was wondering about if is it possible, if at all, to have animated items,
Yes. Like a GIF
like
or something.
GIFs.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, the only thing is, you can't have transparent pixels with
Really, but
GIFs.
with GIFs you can, right?
You
GIFs
can
don't have
have you
transparent.
can have
GIFs don't
either
support
zero
transparency.
opacity or full opacity. You can't have sort of half opacities. You can't make like something see-through because it's either
Oh, like
full
okay.
alpha or zero. If
Okay,
Hmm.
I know
full,
this
full
is more of
opacity.
like a game dev topic, but what I would recommend if you guys are interested in that feature down the road, let's please not open the doors on items with this sort of functionality. But if you want an item to sparkle or change color or something like that, make it as a series of frames, and then I can bake all the user's equipped items. There's no transparency on the client side. The transparency will be baked into the GIF that I render of their avatar with those items equipped. And that'll be done on the server with image processing before the client receives it. So that can be done. It does require more of a pipeline though, because exactly what she's
Uh,
saying. The GIF can't support it, but a series of PNGs can.
yes.
Okay, yeah, this is just out of curiosity. I don't
Also, I'm not
expect it to.
the best with image files and stuff, because I know GIFs in general are very outdated.
Yeah.
But what? Because I know that web web P
WebP.
is that is also
Yeah.
like a
WebP
newer.
or GIF-V. It would basically the client
No,
would receive it as a little movie.
yeah, because or I don't, because I looked a little bit into alternatives to GIFs, because the ones I was trying to make at one point were very low quality, obviously because of the limitations. But from what I read, I think WebP has, or is it WebB? Web, it's one of them.
It's P as in Papa.
Yeah, because that's I think that one has transparency and is and can be animated, if I'm not mistaken.
You're correct.
Okay.
And I know, but I'm not sure if every browser supports WebP.
They mostly should by this point in time, but if you want as a fallback, I could just skip all the animation and have a static image of the first frame of the user's avatar. So we wouldn't be locking people out of seeing stuff if they don't have support for a specific feature. But that is a good note because I wouldn't think to do that
Because
by default.
animated items would be really cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
'Cause
Yeah, that's all from me. Sorry for the questions.
No, that's good.
would it in that case be better to upload it in similar way that, for example, the animated textures in Minecraft is. You know how it's like all in the same image file,
A
but
sprite
there's
sheet.
like an
Yeah.
offset to the frame. Yeah, a sprite sheet.
Yeah, that's pretty easy to do. Just as long as every frame is the same size inside that sprite sheet, any
Yeah,
size can be supported pretty easily.
because that could be like a really cool feature that is different from. Because I don't. I mean, I haven't played a lot of similar games, but I'm not sure how many of them have animated clothes. So
Yeah.
that could be
So
really cool.
something else I would really like to implement is that if you can make clothing sprites that include like horrible colors, like basically doing chroma keying. If you want to do like green screen green, or like absolute magenta as the color of
Mhm.
something, but then shade it darker or lighter, I can put a RGB picker and people can set the colors of stuff. And if you use like,
Um,
go ahead.
I understand what you mean. Um, that could be cool, but as the artist inside of me, um, when you do that, you ruin the sort of values because not every uh, like everything has like different saturations and um, sort of values depending on sort of what color it is. So when you have a white item, the shadows won't be as dark, like the contrast difference won't be as dark as if you have a slightly mid-toned item. So um, what we might end up with is a bunch of clothes that look weirdly shaded because um, because when you just add black to a color, that looks pretty uh, bad. Like you don't just shade with a darker color because bounce light and stuff like that will always change the sort of way the shadow colors show.
Okay.
Oh, I also with the multiple colors of one item. Maybe it's an idea to also just have that as one sprite, right? Then you can just you don't need to have like 6 uploads of the same
How would we?
skirt.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Continue.
Oh, sorry. You don't need 6 uploads of the same skirts but in different colors, but it's just one upload of the 6 different sprites next to each other, and when you click select like a color, it just moves to that sprite, right?
Well, that would help with loading, though it's pretty small files, so it doesn't really change that much. But then we would also have like bigger images, like more,
Links
or
to a
it
gallery.
would be because
Yeah,
all of
because I was wondering, do we want users to have to pay separately for every single color? Or do we just give them this piece and they can change the color in
I
their
don't think we
wardrobe?
have discussed that yet.
Yeah, because I think that's also a good idea because on some sites you have to pay, like I think for the site for how it's done now, you have to pay for every single color individually. I don't know what you would prefer, honestly.
I'll write that down so we
Yeah,
can
yeah.
discuss
Okay.
that. Um, but I was going to say is if we have it done that way with the loading, like those whole images will always be loaded even if you're only using one part of the image. So that would lead to slightly bigger images being
Well,
loaded all the time. I don't know how much that will affect.
I wouldn't worry about it because really, the the images you submit as an artist are going to be for the server to process as what artist controls the art and how it should be distributed to users. But when a user has their avatar, they're going to dress it, and the server is going to render one image of how they are when they're dressed, and that's what people will receive on the client. So
Okay,
it'll
okay,
already be chopped when people are looking at it.
yeah. Then that is a relatively good option. Uh,
Oops.
Yeah, then that I think that is the best, because it will mean that when you're in your wardrobe, flicking through images, you won't have to load every single color change. It will already be loaded.
Yes.
Yes. I'll write that down too, so I can discuss it with the artist. But for future, then in that case, it would be something like if we do the animated, and if we do animated in multiple colors, it would, for example, be like on the y-axis, the different colors, and then on the x-axis, the frames of that color. If that makes
Ah.
sense.
Yeah, that would be
That's
snazzy.
what I can think would be less.
What are you
Okay.
guys doing
Yeah,
the art
sounds
in?
good.
Do you use like Ace Sprite, Libre Sprite, something like that?
I do Photoshop.
Yeah.
Sprite is good for small pixel art, but when you try to make something look realistic, but on a small scale, I feel like Sprite is a bit limiting. And also, it doesn't have as good sort of color correction and curves and all of that,
Hmm.
which is the easiest way to sort of make recolors. In my opinion, at least, that's what I use. I'm not gonna speak for the other artists. I should have written things down while we were speaking.
Well, it'll all be on YouTube as soon as we're done, so.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's good. I can watch it back and cringe at my bad English accent.
Don't worry, I also have an accent.
More coherent than my anything.
Well, you have the standard American English, I guess.
Yes, I do, but I cannot speak Swedish or German or anything.
German.
Yes.
Did you get offended?
Yeah.
Because you didn't live in Germany, right? Did you say Netherlands?
Yeah, I'm in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
But most people are like, what, the Netherlands? Oh, Amsterdam, weed, and
Wow.
that's all they know.
End of knowledge, yeah.
That's
funny you
if they
said
know the
German, 'cause
Netherlands.
Bicycles,
it's
hello. I know two things.
in Sweden, oh, IKEA meatballs. We have Spotify too, come on.
I did not know that.
Skype, Minecraft, and that's it.
cultural touchstones, though, very important.
Yes.
But have a good day, everyone. Thank you so much for
Sorry, you said
being
you
here.
were gonna
Stay
leave
out
a
of
while
trouble.
ago.
Thanks
I'm
for being
so
on.
sorry.
See ya. Bye bye.
Bye. Were you wrapping up too?
No, I'm still going to keep hammering away. So if you want to see the full extent of my coding, check back in when it's on YouTube. Or just hang out too.
I think my partner wanted to eat food because it's 7 p.m. right now.
Ah, yep.
But good luck.
Thank you kindly. Thanks for being on. Great talking with you.
Yeah, it's fun being here. I mean, I just joined the project a few days ago, but I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, thanks for the energy. It's actually really invigorating to see people show up with good ideas and do stuff. So thank you.
Okay, bye bye. Good luck.
Take care. Bye. And this one would be called... I already don't like it, but I'm going to stick with it because this is the convention I picked. It's already in like 3 or 4 files. try to get rid of the dumb errors before I call this thing good. And now I need to okay, that should streamline that a bit. And that's in debug. Should have known. I should have known I would get one wrong. So I think, let me just go to session is not defined. So I think do I want to play whack-a-mole and make it all minimalized, or do I want to, I don't know. Let's do them one at a time. So that would be social. And that's actually in the decorators. This needs some database stuff too, isn't it? So let's see. So these with session engine. So when we create engine, import model is DB. Let's say from and we'll make a new one. the debug guys, the decorators are going to need the same thing, which is so run that, test that. JSONify is not in decorators. Okay, so that's already a pretty good start. For the rest of them, I'm sure I have to play some whack-a-mole with the imports, but I'm going to end the stream because that's a great success, and I'm going to use the bathroom, clean up my code a little bit here, and make a commit. So, good stream, good time. Thanks everybody for showing up, and sayonara.